I noticed that Helluva Boss doesn't have a theme song, so I figured I'd write them one. A lack of conviction can lead to perdition and oceans of well-sunken loss. But with poor behavior, you know there's a savior, a man who makes mustard of moss. He's a hell of a boss. He's a hell of a boss. So with love lies such a cost. He's a hell of a boss. I don't like Helluva Boss. I think it's very bad. If I had to give it a score out of 10, it would be very bad. But I really, really want you to understand I am obsessed with Helluva Boss. It consumes my every waking moment. I can't sleep because this show, as much as I hate it, is so fascinating. And that's what this video is about. It's an exorcism of my brain so that I can do other things with my life. And I want you to come along on this with me. I think it'll be interesting. Yeah, I think it'll be interesting. This video will be broken up into two parts. The first part's gonna be a review. Second part is gonna be a deeper critical analysis. We're gonna ask ourselves, what is Helluva Boss? What is it trying to say? And why does it matter? Hopefully by the end of it, we'll be able to come through some truths about the show, or at least you'll understand why I find it so fascinating. But first, some disclaimers. 1, this is all subjective. I'm making an argument, which means if you disagree, you can argue against it, and you absolutely should. Also, I'm not trying to make anyone feel bad for liking something. If you had a genuine emotional reaction to Helluva Boss, I think that's wonderful, and I would never want to take that away from you. I respect your feelings towards this show, just like I hope you respect my less favorable feelings towards it. 2, hating a cartoon show is not the same as hating the people who made it. While Vivzy Pop is the creator of Helluva Boss, this video isn't gonna talk about her or where this show fits in her portfolio. That's a different kind of analysis. I'm gonna say this again, just so everyone is perfectly understanding me. This is not about Vivian Medrano. This is about Helluva Boss. The cartoon specifically. I'm not gonna look at the comics or extras, just the show. Sorry about that. 3, this video is gonna touch on a lot of really sensitive topics such as homophobia, transphobia, sexual assault, sexism, violence, gore, and a whole mess of other stuff. If any of these things bother you, please skip this video. I promise the next one will be a lot less intense. So with that out of the way, let's go to hell of a boss.
All right.
Helluva Boss is an internet cartoon show created by Vivian Medrano and released on YouTube in 2019. The first thing I noticed about Helluva Boss was how much of it was influenced by the basic cable animations of the 90s and early 2000s. Particularly the Nicktoons of Nickelodeon and the cartoons of Cartoon Network. The most prominent inspiration is Invader Zim, which shares a similar art style and themes with Helluva Boss. They even cast that program's star, Richard Horvitz, in a prominent role. In a lot of ways, Helluva Boss picks up where those shows left off. It's just as cynical and irreverent as anything from Invader Zim or the similarly dark grim adventures of Billy and Mandy, also starring Horvitz. The main difference is that Helluva Boss is an adult show with a hard R rating. It takes the structure of those classic animations and adds all the violence and profanity they can squeeze between YouTube's guidelines. It's Invader Zim, adult party cartoon. Characters say fuck and shit with abandon, all while killing someone for a quick joke. The show proudly wears its content warnings like a badge of honor. They want you to know that Helluva Boss is a mature show.
Who the fuck is innocent, Moxie? From the moment of birth, you're already a parasite leeching off your mama's tits. Get the fuck over yourself, you baby dick prick!
Why, hello, my big-dicked Blitzy.
But you sure as shit ain't gonna tell nobody.
The characters fit into well-worn cartoon archetypes. You've got Blitz, the titular Helluva Boss, Moxie, an employee with low self-esteem, his wife Millie, and Luna, the lady dog. There's also Stolas, who is Blitz's benefactor, the Helluva Boss. I like this aspect of the show in theory. It's a consistent, easy to understand cast that we can relate to and follow from episode to episode, or jump in at a random point and still have a good understanding of who they are. The problem is these characters are all pretty awful. Let's start with Blitz, one of the more important characters. He sucks, plain and simple. Watching him do anything is laborious torture. I think Helluva Boss was going for a lovable, wisecracking asshole a la Blue from Foster's Home or Eddie from Edda and Eddie, but he just comes off as unbearable. Here's a snippet of the kind of demon he is.
I can see you're still a drunken whore, clutching onto that Bielsa juice bottle like it's the last cock in hell. When you set fire to my office in front of a client, you fucking dipshit! Oh, Blitz, you're such a good boss. Yeah, I really want you, sir. Me too. Let's three-way. A new hole!
I love that woman.
Oh, she totally pegs you, doesn't she? Shush your dick-sucking lips, Moxie.
Just goes on like this. Now, I'm not saying you can't make a cartoon with a disgustingly monstrous character, but what's weird is that Helluva Boss wants us to sympathize with him. That's a tall order when we're not given any reason to do so. All of his jokes punch down. There is so much homophobia and sexism in everything he says. How are we supposed to like this character? The show tries to counter this by making him queer in that old-fashioned, I will sleep with anything kind of way.
Your fire doesn't really hurt us, but I mean, I could fake it if that'll get your dick hard.
Starting with the one that treats you like a plaything.
Ooh, that's kinda hot.
Look, shitbag, it takes a lot to keep me down, all right? I took a fuck ton of tranquilizers in the college I dropped out of. Also, I've been strapped nipple first to a car battery, so okay.
A new hole! Oh, Blitz, you're such a good boss. Yeah, I really want you, sir. Me too. Let's three-way. A new hole!
Which is pretty offensive. Is the show saying it's okay to be homophobic to someone if you yourself are gay? Because that's not how anything works. If I call someone a tranny faggot, it really doesn't matter that I'm allowed to say those words because I am both a and faggot. I'm still insulting someone. In a way, it's almost worse because I'm hiding behind my marginalization to make others feel awful. Blitz doesn't get to call other people slurs because he's queer. He's just an asshole that happens to be queer. Helluva Boss could have alleviated some of these issues just by having Blitz get his comeuppance, or at least giving him some weaknesses. Instead, the show doubles down on how frickin' amazing he is. Blitz is an expert mercenary who's incredible at his job, always right about everyone and everything, and always gets his way at the end. That's not how you create sympathy. Can you imagine if Johnny Bravo got with every woman he hit on, was a master of karate, and also a fucking genius? It would be a men's rights activist show. Johnny getting beaten up by the woman he tries to woo is the point. Without it, it's no longer a satire of toxic masculinity, it's an endorsement. This is what Blitz is, a Johnny Bravo who gets everything he wants. Speaking of toxic masculinity, let's look at Moxie, the shy, timid demon with low self-esteem. He's always the butt of the other characters' jokes, especially Blitz, because of his weaknesses. These weaknesses include feminine traits, kindness.
I'm sorry, they just seem so wholesome and happy. I panicked.
Optimism.
Really? These artists put their heart and soul into their work. I can't just give it back like it's worthless.
Loving his wife.
I love you more than the brimstone loves the fire.
And a whole bunch of other not traditionally manly things. Moxie serves as a foil to Blitz, a yin to his yang. He's the voice of reason, trying to temper Blitz in his outrageous schemes. He's the double D of the group, the Chucky Finster. Moxie is the most sympathetic character and also the most engaging. While nothing about him is particularly novel, he's a well-executed archetype with relatable, easy to understand motivations. He's likable because of his flaws and failures. The show often pits his optimistic views of the world against Blitz's cynicism, but because Blitz is unable to be wrong, Blitz's views are always proven right. Moxie is presented as naive and childish for his optimism, or worse, straight up punished for it. When Moxie shows kindness to an evil family by calling the police, they are immediately killed by them. Okay, yeah, I mean, ACAB, I get it. But anyway, which is what Blitz wanted all along. Moxie is visibly traumatized, and it's all treated as the big punchline. How dare you believe in people? Because the show punches down with its comedy, moments like this feel particularly mean-spirited. It's a bully's world, and the bully always wins. The likable Moxie is a patsy, and we are supposed to see him as a patsy too. The last major character is Stolas, a royal owl demon who provides the book Imp needs to travel to the human world. He does this in exchange for sexual favors from Blitz. Blitz, in what's supposed to be comedy, does not get a choice in the matter. Okay, this is rape. There's no other way of putting it. Stolas is forcing Blitz into sexual activity by using his power over him. This is sexual coercion. This is sexual assault. This is rape. The show, however, wants us to believe that this is not. It's just a complicated or maybe a toxic relationship. No, that's bullshit. This is rape. You can't convince me that Blitz is likable, and you can't convince me that Stolas isn't Blitz. Anyway, that's how we're introduced to this character. Let's keep going. Unfortunately. Since this is probably going to be the most controversial thing I say in this video, even though it really shouldn't be, we're going to put a pin in this and move on until a little towards the end. But we are going to come back to this. Stolas is a flamboyant, overly theatrical character who hates his wife but loves his daughter. He's presented as soft and loving, feminine even. Sound familiar? This is mostly played for laughs like it is with Moxie, but the show finds Stolas' behavior more acceptable. More on why later. He likes to overtly flirt with Blitz, often making him uncomfortable with his perverse language, probably because he's him. Helluva Boss wants us to root for this rape. He gets a lot of screen time even though he's not actually part of the Imp agency, and he at least ties Blitz as the most common point of view character in any given episode. The women in Helluva Boss are a disgrace. There's no other way to describe it. This is some of the most sexist character writing I've ever seen. When I described Millie earlier as being Moxie's wife, that wasn't unchecked internal patriarchy. That's the entirety of her character. She has no growth and no personality beyond having a southern accent, Lululand, being good at fighting, and loving Moxie.
I will kill for you until the day we die.
Luna doesn't fare much better. She's a hellhound who's... Okay, I'm sorry, but we have to talk about her design. I would describe Helluva Boss's art style as frantic but consistent. It's over-detailed and borderline distracting, but you can eventually get into its groove. Luna, however, looks like she's from another cartoon. Her design does not make sense for this world. There are other dog people in the show too, and none of them look like they belong, reminding me of this bizarre Codename Kids Next Door and Grim Adventures crossover special where the characters don't even look like they could touch each other without collapsing their respective universes. There's no reason for this design, especially since her character is basically nothing. A slightly annoyed teenager, maybe? She does have a small subplot in an episode where she tries to hit on another dog person, but like, that's it? That's all of her story? She was also adopted by Blitz or something. I really don't understand the lore of these dog people. Are they bodyguards in indentured service? Oh my god, like the last one that I saw, the dog people are actually like adopted in real like pounds for like regular dogs, but they're also like smart, you know, they're sentient, they have like human brains, but they're just like in like prison cages, and like there's just like a teenage girl dog just sitting there in a cage, and I'm sorry, I'm sorry, okay, I have to move on. At best, the women in Helluva Boss are one-dimensional archetypes that serve to further the character growth of men. At worst, their incel message boards come to life. Solus has a wife who treats him horribly and even tries to have him killed later in the show. Blitz has an ex-girlfriend who's a shallow succubus that thinks she's better than everyone else. You know, standard bitch stuff. She's also an alcoholic for humor, which God, can we think about that for a second? They turned a real world problem into a punchline. Super great, love it. There's also Solus's daughter, who's an angsty teen that wants to reconnect with her father. She comes off the most character-ish, character-adjacent of the women, but she's entirely defined by her relationship with her father. In fact, all of the women in the show are defined by their relationships to men. Like, they all have names, I think, but it's just as accurate to call them some guy something. I've had to look up their names online a lot because although I've watched this show dozens of times now, I can't remember them. Because it doesn't matter. They are tools, obstacles, accessories of the much more prominent male characters. Also, and this isn't the end-all standard of feminist analysis, but for what it's worth, Helluva Boss doesn't pass the Bechdel test. In fact, in a recent episode, it almost passes, but then stumbles right at the finish line. It's almost funny, really.
You know, your dad's really worried about you.
On a good show, the cast of Helluva Boss would grow as we learn more about them and their world, but here that's sidestepped for quick punchlines and non sequiturs. This is a show about jokes, not lore, and as I alluded to earlier, the humor here follows a bit of a pattern.
I should have known you'd be here. I can smell fish for miles, which is odd because I believe the nearest ocean is 3 rings down!
And I should have known you'd be here when I heard the Amber Alerts. Stop getting hysterical, fatty!
You gonna buy that load of shit from a baby and the sheep it fucks?
That is so inappropriate!
Robo-Me made us more money entertaining those kids than the ones we sell to get you freaks off, if you know what I mean.
I know what you mean! I have 4 of them!
Okay, keep that guy far away from me.
Does Millie ever peg you?
Sometimes. Wait! Ew! Fuck! Why that?
Oh, Blitz, you're such a good boss. Yeah, I really want you, sir. Me too. Let's 3-way. A new hole!
Can't you even do one thing right?
Can't you finally do something about how fat you are?
I'm not.
You know, it wouldn't kill you to put a salad in your body every now and then.
What? But I'm not fat.
A new hole!
It's a lot of this. That title card can say what it wants, but Helluva Boss is not a mature show. Swearing and killing definitely subtracts from the pool of potential viewership, but there's nothing in this cartoon that I would say is particularly adult. Helluva Boss, for all it's hollering, is a Nicktoon, and its focus on mature themes is juvenile. A child would have no problem following anything happening in this show, and honestly would probably get more out of it than anyone over the age of 18. The sugar rush visuals and frantic pacing feels tailor-made for a younger audience. And I say all this as an adult woman who loves kids cartoons. I watch them all the time. Right now I'm working my way through Craig of the Creek and I love it. I don't even think it's impossible to combine young adult entertainment structures with mature themes and storytelling. But I think in the case of Helluva Boss, this mix of ideas creates a conflict of identity. The main problem is Helluva Boss is unable to balance its love of kids cartoons with its focus on heavier themes. This is because the show is much better at portraying one over the other. The references and allusions to the Nicktoons it adores are pitch perfect. You really feel like you're watching Invader Zim. But Helluva Boss is not as good at tackling adult content. Compared to the encyclopedic knowledge of Saturday morning cartoons the show has, its understanding of mature themes feels more like a book report by a student who just skimmed the cover. Let's go back to the humor. The show uses edgy jokes with little rhyme or reason. Insults and name-calling are thrown out by characters with little thought about what they actually mean. It comes across less as funny and more like bullying. I remember being called a in middle school all the time, even though none of us really knew what that meant. All my tormentors knew was that whenever they said it, I got sad, and that was enough. Helluva Boss is the same. Characters call each other every homophobic and sexist slur they can think of, and it's supposed to come across as a joke, but it's much closer to bullying. Helluva Boss tries to offset this by making the vast majority of its characters queer. Not only is this tactic incredibly transparent, again, you don't get to call everyone a because you yourself are a it's also very insulting to the audience's intelligence. A character gets to be an asshole without repercussions because he's pan? A character gets to make uncomfortable advances on a man because they're both dudes? That's fucked up. Like, really fucked up. It upholds old stereotypes like queer men are predators or gay people are sex freaks. It would be one thing to include these horrible characters as part of a broad spectrum of LGBT+ representation, but it's another to make them the dominating archetype of a show. There's some passing implication that Moxie might be kind of, sort of bisexual, maybe, which would make him a relatively positive queer representation, but outside some creator statements made after the fact, which are, again, not part of this analysis, there's very little to suggest he isn't straight. It wouldn't matter anyway, though, because his monogamous, hetero relationship, while constantly the butt of jokes, is also shown to be the most healthy of the relationships on the show. And it is telling that the most traditional relationship is being given the most blessing here. More on that in part 2. I've heard the argument that these characters are horrible because they are demons from hell. Madeline, what did you expect? They're demons from hell. This doesn't make any sense to me because, like, the characters aren't real? The show isn't real? Because it's a show? Someone wrote this. Are you saying Blitz gets to be a horrible person because he's a demon? Blitz isn't real. People are putting words in his mouth. Also, like, putting assholes in hell isn't a get out of controversy free card. If all the demons were white supremacists or Nazis or fascists or whatever, would you make the same argument that these behaviors are okay because they are in hell? Doesn't make sense. Oh, a quick tangent. I had a whole plan to write about how there weren't any trans characters on the show until I accidentally found out that one of the blink and you'll miss them side characters is supposed to be a trans woman. They're even voiced by a trans woman. I've watched the single episode she's in over and over again for this video, but I had no idea she was trans until I accidentally found out through a Wikipedia page while I was looking for information about a completely separate character. This sucks. If I had to stumble on someone's identity like I tripped over a loose floorboard, that's not good representation. I seriously have no idea how you would know this character's trans just from watching the show. The only possible clue is, and I cannot believe I'm saying this, she has kind of a masculine voice.
Because in Canada they don't find the body.
But that didn't make me think she was trans because of course it wouldn't. I just thought she had a funny voice. Like, oh, isn't it funny that the girl has a funny voice? Like, cartoons do that all the time.
Oh my god, it's a fucking possum!
We have absinthe, Your Highness.
I don't know the creator's intent here, but I really, really hope I wasn't supposed to know this character was trans because of her voice. Because, oh my god, would that be gross.
I will kill.
This is a good time to remind everyone that I am talking about a show, not the people who made it. I'm not suggesting that the creators themselves are homophobic or sexist or transphobic or anything else because I don't know them. They might be the most inclusive people of all time. It doesn't matter. I'm talking about what the art is doing. I can't know anything else. Every episode of the show follows the same pattern. Inciting incident, people are mean to each other, Mean people are proven right, rinse and repeat. A lot of things go unexplained or directly contradict each other, much of which will be covered in part 2. Like I mentioned earlier, Helluva Boss is about the jokes, mean-spirited jokes specifically, and everything else is secondary. Characters, plot, lore, none of it matters. Did you know there's a racial hierarchy in hell and imps are at the bottom? I didn't until the last episode of season 1.
Are you sleeping with an imp?
Also, did you know that these demons are called imps? That's not just the name of their business. That's also what they're called. Also, there are dead people who are demons, but they're not imps because they weren't born in hell or something, and I have no idea where they stand on this hierarchy that apparently exists and has existed throughout this entire show. Did you know Stolas and Blitz knew each other when they were kids? Yeah, that's a new bombshell. The guy who's Blitz knew him and had a crush on him when they were kids. I honestly think that this show is better the less you think about it, because as soon as you try to look at any element too deeply, you reveal something horrible. So in conclusion, the show's like a 4 out of 10. Not great, don't recommend it. But that's only half the picture. 4 out of 10 shows don't get millions of views. They don't amass thousands of fans across the globe. 4 out of 10 shows don't keep me up at night. There's something else going on here. Something that a simple review can't articulate alone. We can talk for hours about how good or bad Helluva Boss is, and lots of people have, but what actually is Helluva Boss? What's it saying? Why is it saying it? Is this show really lol random, like its detractors say, or is there more consistency here than anyone realizes? What does all of this mean, if anything? Helluva Boss is about power. The conflicts in this show don't come from whether or not the demons complete their mercenary missions. I mean, they hardly do them anyway. No, the conflicts in this show come from relationships. And the most important factor in these relationships is power. In Helluva Boss, hierarchy is often rewarded. When I say power here, I mean the traditional masculine definition. Status, strength, physical ability, traits that would be praised in classic Western fiction. Having such power awards you privilege in Helluva Boss. Blitz gets to bully his employees without repercussion because he is the best at what he does and he is always right. And he is always right because he is the best at what he does. His position is not only earned, it is deserved. Power is never rewarded in women, however. Besides femme-presenting characters having no personalities outside of the men in their lives, anytime a woman shows an ounce of power that threatens the status of a man, it is always mocked or recontextualized to better suit the needs of the men. There's this strange recurring joke where Blitz insults Moxie by implying his wife pegs him.
I love that woman.
Oh, she totally pegs you, doesn't she? Does Millie ever peg you?
Sometimes. Wait! Ew! Fuck! Why that?
Why do you have Millie put it in your butt?
It gives me an erection. Hey.
Unlike other sex acts, which the show depicts as good or bad depending on the situation, pegging is always portrayed as insulting. In the world of hell, where being openly queer appears to be the norm, the worst thing you can do, it seems, is give a woman any semblance of dominance over a man, even in bed. This is all assuming you think pegging is inherently a power move, which it isn't, it's just a sex move. This sexism is consistent throughout Helluva Boss. Blitz's ex-girlfriend, whose name is Verosika, by the way, starts out by being a potential new rival for him. However, this is all shattered by the end of the episode when her alcoholism, which is, remember, haha funny, leads to her downfall. Not because she got drunk, which would be its own kind of sus, but because her magic flask accidentally created a giant fish monster or something. Meanwhile, Moxie accidentally gets completely drunk and almost, keyword being almost, gets eaten by a fish before Millie saves him. Because that's the entirety of her character. So to recap, Verosika is punished for being an alcoholic while Moxie gets drunk out of his mind and winds up totally fine. Not only is this an awful portrayal of a real mental illness, but it's extremely sexist. Veronica is humiliated, and we never see her again until a glorified cameo in the season finale where she is, yes, getting drunk. Veronica's blunder was using her power to go against a man. Millie is the perfect ideal here because her power is entirely devoted to her husband. Nothing she does undermines Moxie's authority, and anytime the show starts to lean into Millie having any independence, it switches back to giving her husband the spotlight and all the character growth.
You gonna finish that fucking sentence?
Moxie and Millie's relationship does not change in the show. It starts with Millie being devoted to her husband and ends that way. Further, Moxie's growth in the show is based entirely on his confidence in killing people. He gets better at using guns, and this gives him more confidence. It's growth from power. In a particularly confusing scene, Moxie confidently mocks a couple of humans with Blitz, even making lewd comments towards them.
It's hard to resist, I'm really sorry. I mean, considering your approach thus far, you've had us tied here for what, hours? And you haven't even had us confirm what exactly we are.
What are you?
I'm a Virgo.
I mean, that's what it sounded like back there, you sickos.
Please don't give them ideas, sir.
He has never acted like this before. The change seems to come out of nowhere until we remember that his growth comes from power. If he is progressing as a person by getting better at killing people, then this change makes complete sense. Bullying others is where his character is supposed to go because that is always the end result of power, especially in Helluva Boss's universe. In this same episode, Blitz and Moxie have a heart-to-heart. They talk about how much they respect each other, how they're friends, etc., etc. Like Moxie's confidence in the previous scene, it also doesn't make sense on the surface. We have never seen Blitz do anything kind or friendly to Moxie. Moxie has always been Blitz's employee, and we never see them connect in any other way until this moment. How do we explain this change? Again, it's all about power. Moxie respects Blitz because he is his boss and thus higher on this world's hierarchy. Any semblance of friendship comes from Blitz respecting that Moxie is good at killing, an important aspect of said hierarchy. Everything else is secondary and usually mocked. I haven't talked a lot about Moxie's femcoding as weakness in this video, but it's everywhere and it's horrible. In this moment, Helluva Boss shows us that Moxie is strong not because of some of his feminine leanings, but in spite of them. He can be fruity as long as he's good at killing, and heaven forbid he lets his wife peg him. This superiority through physical violence in Helluva Boss also, unfortunately, extends to sexual violence. Just as killing someone randomly is considered funny because bullying is funny, threatening sexual assault is, to Helluva Boss, equally as hilarious. The show likes to borrow famous slapstick joke setups from its beloved Nicktoons and replace the usual punchline with sexual assault. Here's some examples of a classic joke.
And if you really tick me off, I'm gonna run you down with my car.
If you catch one more fish, just one more fish, you'll be in trouble.
I know I'm not the best boss in the world, but it's nice to have a mug that says I am. Now, clean up this mess or you're all fired!
We've seen this setup before. It's fairly common. Here's how Helluva Boss does the same joke.
Apology accepted.
But if you ever pull a stunt like this again, I will fuck you and your wife.
Alrighty!
That is not the same joke. Maybe it's just our culture's desensitization to violence, which honestly deserves its own video, but threatening to someone does not have the same connotation that threatening to punch someone does. I'm not saying that physical violence is morally superior to sexual violence because that would be awful. What I am saying is that threatening rape cannot be cleanly substituted for threatening to beat someone up. All violence is equally terrible, but not all violence is the same. We can argue whether this is good or bad until the cows come home, and we absolutely definitely should, But again, that requires a whole new video. For now, I just want to emphasize how telling it is that a show that always punches down would naturally extend such mean-spirited jokes to sexual domination without a second thought. Just as power gives people permission to be bullies in this world, so too does it reward them with unquestioned sexual conquest. Helluva Boss either minimizes rape or doesn't understand what it means. Neither is particularly great, but with the latter it can feign ignorance. But the show shoots itself in the foot from the very beginning and never stops. Because the most crucial element of this show, the plot line that has the most relevance, is built around rape. It's time to go back into the Blitz-Stolas relationship, the most important storyline in the entire series. As I said before, Stolas allows Blitz to have the MacGuffin needed to travel to the human world in exchange for sex. Blitz has no say in this. He can either refuse and give up his business or accept and be subjugated to Stolas' will. There are no other options. This is sexual coercion. Stolas is forcing Blitz to have sex with him. Anytime someone is making someone have sex against their will, even if it's for monetary gain, that is not sex work. That is an ultimatum. That is forced consent. I'm sorry, but I'm not budging on this issue. Even if the show tries its hardest to convince me that this relationship is somehow not real. And I'm not kidding about that. Helluva Boss bends over backwards to try and show its audience that this is not sexual assault. After this relationship is set and established in the first episode, the second episode spends 5 minutes showing how great of a father Stolas is with a long, beautiful song. Everything will be okay. And it's weird. All we know about this character up to this point is that he's forcing Blitz to have sex with him. Now the show wants us to believe that he is actually a good person? Even later, when we see that he's estranged from his daughter and fighting with his wife, we are still made to be sympathetic for him. We feel bad about where he is, and nowhere in this episode is it ever addressed that his relationship with Blitz is any less than kosher. Some might argue that Blitz is just saying he doesn't like Stolas fucking him when in reality he does because they're playing some kind of game with each other, but that would be monstrous? Like, literally, don't say that. No means no. What's wrong with you? You could also say that he deserves it because he's a horrible person, which, no one deserves to be raped no matter how shitty they are. I guess you could say that none of this matters because Stolas and Blitz aren't real. Which, okay, sure, I did say something kind of, sort of like that earlier. But that's also why I'm not treating them like they're real. I don't feel bad for Blitz because he doesn't exist. What upsets me is the narrative being pushed forward that their relationship is not based around but is merely toxic in a fun, entertaining way. That sucks. That's a bad message. At best, you could say that Stolas is only having unconsensual sex with Blitz some of the time, but hey, some of the time is still. I don't believe Helluva Boss is intentionally condoning. It just treats sex the same way it does violence, as a show of power. And power is good. Stolas is a royal prince of the demon world, a man of incredible wealth and ability. Therefore, within the world of the show, he needs to be rewarded. Blitz and Stolas' relationship is not built on emotional connection, but power. Having sex with someone is a physical act of strength, just like killing. Violence and sex are often conflated in Helluva Boss because they both serve the same purpose, showing your superiority to another person. When Blitz threatens to fuck Moxie and his wife, it's the same as him saying, "I'll kill you. This is something I can do to you and you can't do anything else about it because you are weaker than me. I am stronger than you, so I can rape you." Stolas is made to be endearing. He's a little naive because of his privileged upbringing. He's presented as a softie and a romantic, and he believes that he's in love with Blitz, despite Blitz showing almost no interest in him. Blitz sees this as a transaction, while Stolas sees it as foreplay. In these moments, and these moments only, Helluva Boss shows Blitz to be in the wrong. Blitz is presented as an evil manipulator leading Stolas on. Stolas is presented as doing nothing wrong. In this relationship built on the show wants us to believe that Stolas is the one being hurt by Blitz, even though Stolas is the one forcing him to have sex. Helluva Boss either doesn't see this relationship as or does not care enough to examine it. What matters to the show is power, because he is weaker than Stolas. He is lesser. Helluva Boss sees conventional ideas as normal and doesn't question established supposed truths. When you look at the show through this lens, a lot of its more baffling decisions start to make sense. In episode 7, the season finale, Moxie and Millie go to a club in the lust layer of hell. Blitz tries to follow them inside, but the guard tells him it's for couples only.
Oh yeah, I'm with those two.
This club is for couples only.
It's what?
No date, no reservation, no entry.
But this is hell, where being queer seems to be the norm. Couldn't they just be polyamorous? It's been mentioned in the show before. Demons know about this. Why doesn't Blitz bring this up? Even if just to lie to get in the building. Maybe this club is closed-minded, you know, the club in the lust dimension, but this isn't true either. When we finally get inside, Moxie sings a song of love to his wife. The owners of the club mock him and say that love isn't allowed in this club, that only carnal desire is acceptable.
You singing love songs in my lustful lounge?
Ozzy's ain't the place for sentimental sounds.
So, to recap, in this lust palace, you can only do sexually perverse things, but they only allow monogamous couples inside? Not only are polyamorous relationships just forgotten about, but I guess orgies are out of the question too? In the only sex lust club? I am, of course, beating around the bush here, pun intended. The reason all of these contrivances happen is so the show can have Blitz and Stolas go on a date. Helluva Boss will toss out its own rules or leave polyamorous people hanging in order to push the Stolas-Blitz pairing further. That, along with its jokes, are more important than any other aspect of the show. But it leaves uncomfortable questions. If we assume that all of this is on purpose, just how tolerant of queer people is this show? Maybe that's the wrong way to phrase the question. Queerness is a strange element in Helluva Boss. Lots of characters are queer on the show, but the way these qualities are portrayed feels exploitative. Being gay seems more like a means to an end than an honest trait. I'm not a gatekeeper. Anyone who tells you how to be your own identity is a despicable person that should be discarded. So I'm not saying that the characters in Helluva Boss are queering wrong. What it feels like is that these characters are queer for the audience. That's why characters call each other perverts or sluts or whatever, and the meaning doesn't matter. It only matters as entertainment for the audience. Blitz is pansexual, so he can make homophobic and sexist jokes. Blitz is pansexual, so he can have a relationship with Stolas, another man. Stolas is attracted to men, so he can be attracted to Blitz. None of the queer identities feel natural, and I think that's really what's going on with this show. It's not that it hates the gays or condones rape. It's not anti-queer or pro-heteronormative values above all else, at least not purposefully. It's just that, under all its layers, Helluva Boss is a fetish show. It really is that simple. The reason the lore isn't well developed or consistent, the reason people call each other random homophobic slurs, the reason the show focuses more on a single horrible relationship over its own concept is because the only thing that matters is the kink. Stolas and Blitz's relationship is built on forced sex, which is horrible. However, if our goal as viewers is not to view this relationship as part of a larger narrative arc with character development, but instead to indulge in a toxic relationship from a safe distance for our own pleasure, then this couple totally works. Helluva Boss is a fan fiction without the fiction. That is not to shit on fan fictions. They are just as much art as any other medium. But like how most fan fictions require a basic understanding of their source material to work, Helluva Boss just doesn't make sense on its own. Luna does not serve any narrative function, and her visual design makes no sense. However, if her purpose is to be eye candy for the audience, then it totally works. But if you don't find her attractive, there really isn't any point to her. Helluva Boss even jokes about this by doing a fourth wall break to shame the audience for sexualizing her.
Sorry, sweetie, spring break is no place for young, vulnerable goth girls. You know, the kind of freaks up there who drool all over you.
This is, of course, hypocritical because there is no other reason for Luna to exist. She is a sexist trope in any other context. Unlike other fan fictions, Helluva Boss does not have a source material to pull from as its own source material. What it does have is signifiers that alert its audience to its true purpose. I said before that I don't want to analyze this show outside of its own content, but that's not the same as contextualizing it within its medium. Helluva Boss was not created in a vacuum. Much like how it borrows heavily from children's animation of the last few decades, the show expects you to understand its more sordid references. When you see what Solus does to Blitz, you cannot actually engage with it organically because, again, you would have to consider the moral implications. The intended response, I believe, is for the viewer to say, I ship it, or I favor this pairing in my mind for reasons outside the scope of this cartoon. At that point, the viewer is no longer engaging solely with Helluva Boss as a piece of media, but as a reflection of a very specific kind of person's very specific wants and desires. And I think that's fascinating. Never before have I encountered a work of art that encourages you to dismiss it at your own discretion. Helluva Boss does not care about its lore, its narrative, its characters, its humor, really. Instead, it's a buffet line, inviting its audience to take whichever elements they like and discard anything they don't. Eat whatever you want. It's the same price either way. Make up your own story, as long as you enjoy yourself. That's why I'm obsessed with Helluva Boss. It truly, truly tries to have its cake and eat it too. But of course it doesn't work. I'm sorry if that sounds flippant, but a cartoon is not a buffet. You don't get to just ignore all the things you don't like. There is sexism here. There is homophobia here. There is a plot that goes nowhere. There is terrible world building. The purpose of a fan fiction, at least a good chunk of them, is to provide narratives that you could not get from the original piece. You can ship characters that have no right to be in a relationship with each other because that's what you personally want to see. You could fetishize bad things because who cares? It's fan fiction. Do what you want. But you can't do that to the original art itself, because not everyone has the same wants. Fan fictions contradict each other because they are representative of what each individual writer desires. The original work is just the foundation, but a necessary one to give stability to the structures fan fiction authors build on top of it. Helluva Boss is a poor foundation. It's an emperor with no clothes that will insist to its dying breath that it's not naked. It's a house of cards you build up without realizing that the bottom layer has already toppled over. If this show is just supposed to be softcore porn, well, that's fine. But it doesn't dismiss anything I've said in this video. It can be a cartoon about horny demons, and it can be misogynistic. It can be a silly show about silly people in hell, and it can reinforce really bad ideas. So yes, this cartoon is probably just supposed to be a do-it-yourself shipping guide. But whether its horrible ideology is intentional or not, it's still there, and it cannot be ignored. What we have here are a series of competing binaries: Nicktoons versus adult animation, queerness versus homophobia, character study versus fetishization. Helluva Boss is too scared to commit to any singular identity. It wants to present a toxic relationship, but also wants people to get turned on by it. It wants queer characters, but also wants to have as many homophobic jokes as possible. It wants to be progressive, but also retain some outdated viewpoints and hierarchies. It wants to fetishize so many things, but it doesn't want to be pornography. It wants to be everything to everyone. I guess that's why I'm obsessed with this show. Helluva Boss is full of contradictions. It makes a firm stance in its ideology and who its target audience is. If you're not already with the program, then it doesn't want you here. And I'll admit there's a part of me that this show kind of appeals to. I've got kinks and fetishes for days, but I can't ignore the exploitation of queer identities and toxic relationships just for a kink. I can't turn off my brain and just masturbate. All of these terrible things are here. They're staring at me in the face. I can't ignore them. I don't think Helluva Boss is intentionally hateful. In my honest opinion, I think the show just doesn't care. The female characters are poorly written because they're not the focus. The show supports hierarchy because it wants certain characters to fuck. Helluva Boss does the bare minimum to achieve the story it wants. The crime, if there is any, is in what it considers foundationally necessary. That's the show's real ideology. When we strip Helluva Boss of everything, get down to its naked roots, what we have left is a hateful show that takes people for granted. A show that sees relationships as transactions, power as self-justifying, and social systems as natural. A show that lacks the self-awareness to realize that the true villain is itself. Well, thank you all so much for watching that video. I hope you liked it. I know this is a controversial topic and that this particular show has a very big fan base, which is why I'm probably not going to read the comments for my own mental health. But I want to give everyone a fair shake. If you have an argument against me, I want to hear it. So I will be doing a live stream response to this video. I will do a live stream post-mortem on the video essay at the date on the screen. Should be there somewhere in front of me. Come on this date, we'll talk. You can yell at me all you want or tell me that I was okay and that my analysis was pretty good or solid at least. If you like this, check out my Patreon. The link's going to be there in the description. And please like, share, and subscribe. This video is not going to get monetized. I already know that because of all the tough words that are in here. So if you can share it with everyone, that would I would really appreciate it. So until next time, he's a hell of a boss. He's a hell of a boss. Oh, with love lies such a cost. He's a hell of a boss. Cool. That's probably good enough.
A new hole!